Okay, so in this video, we're going to build on what we did in the last video. In the last video, we're able to have the orb pass through the fire particle system and begin to take damage as expressed by a reduction in the enemy HP variable. Now, having a variable called enemy HP doesn't in and of itself do anything if a decision to destroy the enemy isn't then done. So what we're going to do, we're going to put in a statement that says if this reaches 0, then destroy it. At that point, then the enemy HP variable will actually be acting as HP, because right now it's just the variable that's decreasing. So let's go to our script, the HuskCon script. And in the update section, we're going to check to see what the value of the enemy HP is. So if it reaches 0, we're going to have the object be destroyed. And again, at that point, then enemy HP, the variable, will be functioning as hit points. So in the update section, if enemy HP, and actually let's do less than 1, squiggly brackets. And this is pretty straightforward. Destroy, parenthesis, game object, small g, not uppercase. Now this starts as 100, and it loses 10 per tick. So that means we need this to only be 30. Let's go ahead and save that, and let's just test to make sure that works. And there we go. It destroyed when it reached 0. And you could go even further if you want some kind of death animation. So if it was actually a humanoid or whatever, and then you would have some kind of animation be triggered. Or in this case, we could just add yet another particle system like a burst. But I don't want to go any further on that because that starts to really become derivative of what we're trying to do. And we're just trying to show how to have the object be affected by the trap in a specific way. So in the way that we want the fire trap to affect it, the fire grill trap to affect it, is to have the object take damage over time, and we have now successfully done that. So let's now give the husk its own fire system so that we can see that it is indeed taking damage. So we're going to click on fire system, copy, paste. And since it's a child, the duplicate also gets turned into a child. So we just drag and drop that out of there. And we can just attach that to the husk. Now we'll move it over to the husk's location. And let's actually just get above this because I don't think it's lined up quite right. Actually, that's all right. This one just seems to be pushed back a little bit for some reason. So let's take that one, move it forward, which explains why, even though this passed over the trap, it didn't really look like it was going through the particle system in the last video, or when we tested in this video either. Okay, so we're just going to trim this a little bit because it's too big. So first, we're going to go to Shape. And again, we're going to close this in. You can see it's not centered, but then again, I just kind of randomly put it there. All right. So let's center it a little bit more. So it's looks okay as far as being above it. And we could make a few tweaks to it. So right now, since we changed the size of the spawn area, we inherently increase the concentration. So because you still have the same particle size and you still have the same emission rate, but it's in a small area. So again, keep those things in mind that when you make a change to one attribute of our particle system, you might have to make other changes as well, but we'll leave it like that for now. We can Let's make the lifetime be a little bit shorter. Let's make it like 0.6. And let's slow the speed a little bit to say 1.5. And I guess we will change the size despite what I said. So start size, let's make it like 0.7. There we go. And nothing, again, nothing really magical about that appearance. I'm just trying to make it distinctive from that fire. And again, the sculpting, the design of the particle system in itself, you can add a non-round particle system. You can also add transparency and a lot of other things as well, but that's really a separate tutorial. Okay, so the husk now has its own particle system for it to display once it's passed through here, which means by default, we want this to not be looping, and we want it actually to be disabled. So what we're going to do is, rather than giving the particle system its own script, we're going to have the husk object modify it. That way we keep the functionality into as few scripts as possible. When you have larger projects, you really can't do that, but we have a small project here, so we'll try to consolidate everything in. So let's go ahead and open that up. So up here, we're going to do public, and we're going to do particle system. Oops, if I could spell. So public particle system, and we'll just call it, did I use on? I already used on fire, so we don't want to do that again. So we'll just call this burning PS, burning particle system. Save that. Whereas this one is a private, because I made this one public, you can go into the inspector, and you can see that particle system. You can see that variable, and we'll just drag and drop it there. So now, in addition to being a child to the husk, for want of a better term, is aware of the flame sys particle system and can make changes to it. So let's go back to our script. And now what we're going to do is, since we now have this particle system, we are going to make a change to it. So in the start section, we are going to say burning PS dot get component. Whoops, sorry, not rigid body, it's particle system. Forgetting what I'm doing. And I can never spell particle system for some reason. Enable emission. Whoops, sorry, it brought it up but did not select it. Enable emission equals false. So we're saying do not emit any particles when this gets instantiated. Now, if you notice, this is underlined in green because this is really obsolete coding. But for now, since this is introductory, I do want to show you this just so you see that consistency of using get component, drilling down into the particle system, and then making a change to a certain attribute within that component. So the proper way to get into a particle system is you're supposed to break it down into its modules. I have separate tutorials about doing that, though. Okay, so at the start, it gets disabled. So that means we want it to get enabled. So you can either do it here when it first touches the trigger, or if you want there to be a brief delay, you could do it down here. 6 one way, 1/2 dozen the other. We'll just put it here. So as soon as it collides, the particle system will become enabled. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to tweak this a little bit because this is kind of fast. So let's make sure we can actually see it getting on fire and then getting destroyed. So enemy HP is 30, takes away 30, so that brings it to 0. And we enable the particle system. So let's put in a slight delay because just in case there's like a frame or something where a couple particles get made. So what we're going to do is we go back to that particle system and we'll create a start delay. Very slight, just like 0.1. That way, like I said, a random particle doesn't get created before it gets disabled. Okay, let's run it. There we go, it's on fire, and then it gets destroyed. Absolutely perfect. So all that remains now is to have this get set on fire only once the collision occurs. Now, what we could do, you can actually leave it like this if, say, you want it to be on fire all the time. Like, say, maybe it's like, I don't know, something that's volcanic, so it's constantly on fire. Or maybe it's a building that's on fire, so you don't want it to be a trigger occurrence. You want it to be on all the time, so you certainly could do that if you wished. So let's look at how to do this for the grill. It's really rinse and repeat. Because what we did is we made the husk be aware of the flame system, disabled the particle system, and then on the collision, enabled it. Same thing. Going to do exactly the same thing. It's just right now we don't have a script to detect the collision. As I said in the last video, we're going to have a script on both sides, so we have to create one for the grill. So let's right-click down here, create C# script, and we'll call this fire grill. Click on the grill object, drag and drop the script to it, and then open it up. Like I said, we're basically copying this functionality. We're just going to give it a different variable name. So let's get rid of the remark lines. Again, they don't get executed. They simply are for documentation purposes. So public particle system. And we'll call this grill fire PS. Save it. Go back to our grill. Grill fire PS. Drag and drop it. Go back to our script. And now, in the start, we're going to disable it just like we did in HuskCon. So grill fire PS dot get component particle system dot enable emission equals false. Because again, we don't want it to run at the beginning. Now, we need to add the void on trigger enter and if other. And yes, it's okay that both scripts use other because these are independent of each other. They're not like a global variable. Actually, shouldn't say global. They're not a static variable because a static variable can be read throughout the application. So if other.tag, remember we set up the tag in the last video, equals double equals, and it, I believe, was just husk. So if other.tag equals husk, then we want this to get enabled. And now that I think about that, that would make an argument for there being a delay in the enabling of the emission on the other script, on the Hus script, because the fire isn't here right away. So you'd want a brief moment where the fire is on the grill and yet not on the enemy. But let's test it like this. There we go. All right, so let's do that. Let's go to Husk, and we will move the enabling. So we'll just cut that with Control X, and then we'll paste it here. Did I save that? Let's make sure. There we go. So there is a delay now. All right, so I think that about brings us to the end of this tutorial because, as I said, the goal was that you would have a fire trap. When an object passes over the fire trap, the fire instantiates, and then the object would catch on fire, take damage over time, and then as an extra, I showed you the enemy get destroyed. Damage over time might not destroy the enemy in your game, but at least you know how to connect the dots there. So I think that's it. And what I'll do is, if there's enough interest, what I'll do is I will do a series of these. So this is just the fire grill. There's like the floor launcher, the wall launcher, the retractable spikes. Those probably will be much simpler because you don't have the time to develop the particle system because they just kind of animate. And it's much simpler because you're not you don't have a particle system. You're really just moving the object. You're applying force in a certain direction. So I'll tell you what, if you want to see that, just leave a like on this video, and that way I know that there is interest in seeing more Unity tutorials on how to make Fortnite traps. Okay, so that should about do it.